everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Glad to be back. Creating some new content for the channel, so I hope you guys like it. Wanted to start doing more educational videos, and probably the one thing that I get asked the most is, how do I read a natal chart? And so obviously this is going to differ person to person depending on the kind of astrology that you practice. Obviously, you know, everybody's going to kind of have their own formula. So this is just how I kind of do it down and dirty, a very simple example lesson for you guys as to when you first look at a natal chart, some of the most important points, at least that I look for, and the sequence that I look at them to better understand the chart, why the person is here, and make the most of their chart, right? That's what the natal charts are for. At the end of the video, I'll also give you guys just a couple books that I always keep on my desk that can be particularly helpful. And eventually, this is something I've been saying I'm going to do, but I'm actually putting the list together now. I'm going to do a video on my favorite books. So that way, those of you guys who are going to continue learning and doing more research into astrology can kind of get some of my favorites. Certainly, there's a ton of them out there. So yeah, we'll get to that video at a later point. So when we're looking at the natal chart, right, me specifically, and this is going to be where kind of my flair comes in. My background is studying Western astrology. And I then went on to go through Jeffrey Wolf Green's Pluto School, and also just a whole variation of different evolutionary astrology classes and kind of courses and things like that. So that seems to be my preference. I've also trained with Vedic astrologers. I use Vedic techniques to some extent, especially looking at some of the nakshatras and how they actually relate to Western astrology. Kind of weird, but I find it very accurate. I also studied degree astrology, and probably one of my favorite teachers and courses and things that I've worked through and taken has also been Nicola Stanovich's work. So you'll see a combination of like Western astrology when I talk about astrology, degree astrology. I work specifically with Placidus only because I find that for prediction purposes, like when a planet ingresses into a house in transit, Placidus can be incredibly accurate with timing. So to each their own. I understand everybody's going to have their own way of doing it. Something I've been diving deeper into in my studies recently has been horary. I've been going through a horary course, which is really kind of racking my brain, but in all the best ways. And now I'm actually going deeper and learning more about Hellenistic astrology. So I'm incorporating more whole sign interpretations into some of my readings, and especially for just basic remedy, astrological remedy purposes. All right, so that was a lot. Let's get to the example chart. Let's take a look. So this particular chart that we're looking at is for February 11th, 1956, 1:22 a.m. in Covina, California. So here's the order that I'm going to go in. If you guys want to go ahead and write this down, or if you just want to make a note of it, and then we're going to work off of this list. So in order, this is how I assess a natal chart. First, I take a look at the ascendant, the sign and the element, and the overall general purpose of the rising sign. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Then I will look at the sun, the placement, meaning the house, and also the sign and the degree. And then I do the same thing with the moon. The placement of the house, the sign, and the degree. I don't even start looking at aspects yet. I just look at the rising, the sun, and then the moon. The next thing that I look at is then the chart ruler. So it's important for you guys to know rulerships and understand that. Probably something that can be really helpful for beginners if you don't know that is either like creating almost like astrological flashcards, or maybe creating like a graph. So across the board, you have all the traditional and modern day rulers for all of the signs. Once I know the chart ruler, I locate it in the chart, which house it's in, what sign it's in, what degree it's in, and the aspects that it's making. I find that the chart ruler has a tendency to be very personal to the client, and they may function as the chart ruler. Then I look at the nodal placements. So I want to look at what house are the nodes placed in, what degrees they're in, and aspects to the nodes. This, in my opinion, is very important because I like to practice like I said, evolutionary. So I take a long, hard look at the nodes, aspects to the nodes, and I also focus a lot on Pluto. So the next thing that I would then look at would be Pluto. What sign is it in? What degree is it in? What house is it in? And aspects to Pluto. I do then look at the midheaven because I feel like the midheaven plays a role in how the person comes across out in the world, you know, what their goals may be to some extent. Then I move on to looking at patterns in the chart. So some people are real sticklers about patterns. Sometimes I'll note them. It really just depends on if they have something very unique going on. I'll look at both the patterns in the chart, which is basically the patterns that the planets make. So if they're all in one hemisphere, if they're bunched up, if they're making a bowl, a splash, a seesaw, a bundle shape, that can also be something that's very insightful, and it can tell me a lot about the person if they tend to have just, you know, stelliums or conjunctions in certain signs or in certain placements. That's going to be a lot of emphasis in that particular area of their life. I take a look at the eastern and the western side of the chart, as well as the northern and the southern hemispheres. So basically, if we're looking at it, the left side of the natal chart is actually going to be the eastern side or the eastern hemisphere. The right side is going to be the western hemisphere. And if you have more going on with the eastern side of your chart, right, so that would be the left side of the chart, it's going to have more emphasis on being self-reliant, not being so flexible, being really focused and fixated on doing things your way, and it can be a little uncomfortable to get out of old patterns. Versus looking at the right side of the chart or the western side of the chart, it can represent being more flexible, outside influences, other people affecting the client, and things that relate to being dependent or dependency in general. Not necessarily like you need other people, but other people somehow or other energies outside of the person actually affect the overall kind of life circumstances. So that seems to be something that's important as well. Obviously, the top part of the chart, meaning like the 12th house through the 7th house, this is going to really put a lot of emphasis on what they are doing out in the world, or their public image, or just how they're experiencing life out and about. Versus the bottom part of the chart, houses 1 through 6, this is going to be more personal, private, kind of hidden, more deep, introspective kind of soul work. So just looking at a chart and looking at the patterns really can tell you a lot, and just where you have a tendency to have the planets kind of like bunched up in general. Obviously, anything beyond this is going to be a little bit more advanced. So I know I'm going to get comments from people like, what about asteroids? And what about Chiron? And what about this? And what about that? Yes. Some of the major asteroids that I work with are Chiron, Pallas, Lilith, Ceres. Sometimes I look at Eros. But beyond that, I don't look at too much other than the main ones, Juno, right? So definitely do have a tendency to look at those. And there are readers who do nothing but focus on asteroid readings and what that means archetypally in astrology. I just find that those are the main ones that I look for, unless something really kind of piques my interest in that situation. Then I would definitely shift gears and focus purely on an archetypal theme. Something else that I do find interesting is when there's a planet or an asteroid on an angle, because I do feel like that plays into the chart very significantly, especially if it's on the ascendant or if it's on the midheaven. They may really embody that particular archetypal energy of the planet and or the sign. So I'm going to show you how I just break down and do a general interpretation for this chart. So if we were to go in order of how I go about assessing a natal chart, we're going to start with the ascendant. Now this is Placidus. So this person has 0 degrees Sag rising. So 0 degrees is always linked to Pluto or a seed or something brand new. So I would kind of assume, both by looking at Jupiter being the chart ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter being in the 9th, so very Saggy energy, and then Jupiter being in conjunction to Pluto, and also in opposition to the sun. So it's a lot of Pluto aspects in this chart. Basically, when we look at this, Jupiter loves being in the ninth house. Jupiter also does not mind being in a solar sign, right? We think Jupiter does very well in Sag, Pisces, but also Leo. So Jupiter in Leo, big creativity, big personality, big beliefs, big dreams, right? But also in a sense of never stop learning, never stop creating, never stop traveling, never stop expanding on their own personal beliefs and values, especially when it comes to Leo type things. So Pluto conjunct Jupiter obviously is this real fixation on the power of creativity and how it relates either on a spiritual or on a philosophical level, being the conjunction to the ninth house. Now, we also look at Jupiter in opposition to the sun. It is in opposition to the moon, but not as much as the sun. So it's interesting when you bring that energy in opposition to the sun, it's almost like there is lots of hope and optimism that comes because the sun also in this chart rules the ninth house. So it's storytelling, writing, philosophy, beliefs, spirituality, sharing one's own personal experiences and travels and what they've learned or what they've learned to believe in with other people, Aquarius, right? So there's this exchange that's going on back and forth between the sun and Jupiter. And sun-Jupiter oppositions kind of manifest as feeling like everything they touch may turn to gold. Or that things can become very revolutionary in a way in terms of what they experience and how it kind of shapes their belief system as they go throughout their life, right? Jupiter also is in aspect. I personally work with a 2 or 3 degree orb for a conjunction. I work with about maybe an 8 degree orb for a trine. Some people would say 10. So we don't exactly see Jupiter in a trine here to Mars, but it's close. It's about 11 degrees, so it's enough to kind of feel that energy of the passion of wanting to share this with other people. All right, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So we just know that Jupiter and Pluto are merging these two energies of the chart in the 12th house, because Pluto is the 12th house ruler in the 9th. So definitely their dreams, their belief systems, their visions maybe that might play somehow into what they talk about, teach about, write about, so on and so forth. Okay, so now we move on to the sun in this chart. So the sun is in Aquarius. The sun in Aquarius is unconventional, different, quirky. Being at 21, it's a Sag degree. So if you follow Nicola Stanovich's degree theory, we look at 1 to 12 being Aries to Pisces, okay, and then we look at 13 to 24 as being Aries to Pisces, and then 25 to 29 is obviously going to be Aries to Leo. So I encourage you guys to look into that theory because I find it very accurate, especially if we're looking at planetary degrees or the house cusps. I'll do more videos on that. So we've got his sun at a Sag degree, 21, in opposition to Jupiter, right? And Jupiter is actually sitting in a Gemini degree. So I can see that there's this theme of self-beliefs and how that plays into what they write about or what they've learned or maybe self-taught in some way. The sun is the self, it's the ego. Remember, like the solar system, everything revolves around the sun. So the sun at 21 is also very saggy. And I'm liking that the sun is actually not only an aspect to Jupiter, but the sun is actually in a sextile to Mars and the North Node. So that drive, right? North Node, Mars in the first, that drive to travel, to learn, to educate, to teach, to share, to preach, whatever, anything like that seems to be very important to this person. And this is what we would call a lunatic. I don't mean that in a literal way. I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose, but the lunatic meaning the sun and the moon are very close together. So the sun is that consciousness, right? It burns, it knows its purpose, it has a plan, it's kind of the boss of the chart. And then the moon, which is very sublunar, it's intuitive, it's what we don't realize that we're doing, it's what we naturally kind of tap into, and it's how we respond to things in a very instinctual level. So when the sun and the moon are conjunct like this, it's very what you see is what you get, right? Very Aquarian, very pure Aquarian, off the wall, oddball kind of energy. So the sun and the moon are within a 6-degree orb. So they're going to share this merger of the conscious and the unconscious, and they might talk and they might write. I found that people who have moon in the 3rd house, they like long drives, they like trips, they like to have conversations. It's a way for them to kind of work through emotional blocks. Is that one of their ways of kind of venting might be going for a long drive or talking on the phone or calling a friend, right? Especially in Aquarius, and sharing these ideas with a friend because of the oppositions that he has both to Jupiter and Pluto. And it's like, oh, I had this dream, I had this insight, I have this feeling, and relaying that information, because the 3rd house is all about, text messages, phone calls, emails, writing, conversations, short distance trips, siblings. And then we also look at the aspects that the moon is making. So just as the sun is in its sextile to Mars in the North Node, sextiles are positive kind of Venusian energies. As long as you do the solar energy, you reap the benefit from the sextile. So I would say that he or this person may have real strong North Node Mars, genuine impulses to explore, to travel, and sharing these ideas and writing about where he's been, or writing about what he's learned, and finding ways to kind of relate that to groups of people, Aquarius. But the moon also is telling me that it's this fixation in transformation, right? Moon ruling the 8th house. So the moon makes the sextile to the North Node exactly. Love it. And maybe that suggests that they might be very much interested in learning about psychology, mysticism, the occult, patterns, things, charts, graphs, all these kind of more 3rd house things. And I definitely know that about this person. They like to assess charts and kind of like methods and like flows and things that might be like more kind of prediction based. So that's the sun and the moon and the rising sign. It's interesting that they kind of all seem to make aspects to each other, right? The sun makes aspects to Jupiter, the chart ruler. The moon makes aspects also to planets that are in the 1st house that's ruled by Sag, 1st house rising. So obviously I could go on. This is just the down and dirty version. Then we go and we look at the chart ruler and the aspects in the house that it rules. So like I said, Jupiter actually rules the ascendant. It's located in the 9th. So somebody who likes faraway trips, they like learning about art and creativity. They might be really fixated on that, especially because it's conjunct Pluto. So that can be like really, really, really fixated on learning a lot about something. Pluto being the ruler of the 12th house can be anything from film to stuff that involves like sleep, dreams, dreamscapes, things relating to past lives, anything relating to photography, stuff of that nature. So that can definitely be a talent of this person's. It's kind of relating all of what they see visually in a dream, kind of dreamy-scape out into the world. So yeah, Jupiter makes a number of aspects. Jupiter has a soft trine to Mars. It has an opposition to the sun. And it makes a quincunx or an inconjunct to Mercury. So it tells me that there may be some challenges or issues, kind of deciphering and maybe figuring out, what it is he wants to do for a living. Maybe he kind of goes back and forth with, I want to write, and then I want to, film, or I want to take pictures, or I want to paint. So there seems to be a little bit of bouncing back and forth between things. And quincunxes or inconjuncts just represent energy that's uncomfortable, that's trying to sort itself out. Mercury is also the ruler of the 7th house, so that's partnerships, and it's the ruler of his south node. So it tells me that maybe issues in relationships can arise as a result of not being on the same page about professional goals, right, with their partner, and that their partner might feel like they're a little bit too all over the place, or that they kind of do a little bit of everything, but they have partners that are more, kind of like, okay, make money, Mercury and Capricorn in the 2nd. Somebody who's like really practical and like they're really kind of determined to make resources, and so that doesn't always jive with how he spends money, his belief systems, what he does, where he wants to travel, his beliefs, even his culture, right, to some extent. So then we look at the nodal placements, and he's got the North Node in the 1st house, which in my opinion houses trump signs, meaning we want to look more so at the actual house rather than the sign. The sign is going to be the lens that we're looking through, just so you guys are aware of that, okay? So when we look at this, the North Node is in Sagittarius in the first house, which means part of his purpose that he's coming into in this lifetime is to learn more about himself, first house, his body, how he feels, how he moves, independence, doing things on his own under the guise of Sag. Self-education, self-learning, self-belief, self-movement, learning to be on his own and learning to find the ability to do that. Now, first house North Node conjunct Mars is striving for creativity, striving for love, striving for romance, striving for fun and adventure, right? And also children somehow playing a role into this because children are the ruler of his fifth house. Now, Mars also rules his 12th, so he might have these subconscious drives to just like create or bring life to things in general. Now, his South Node, which is in Gemini in the 7th house, means he has some kind of karma relating to partnerships or relationships. This is a lifetime not fixated on relationships. If they come in, great. He knows how to do relationships, but he can get too comfortable in them. Interesting that it's in Gemini, so it can talk about duality or double. I do know for a fact that this person was married twice. And the ruler of that is Gemini in the 2nd. Excuse me. The ruler is Gemini, but Mercury is the ruler of his South Node, and it's placed in the 2nd. And that is in a Pisces degree. So it kind of talks about like possibly issues with communication, just clarity in regards to values and money and resources and being on the same page with other people. Mercury also rules the 10th house, so it does kind of also shine a light on the fact that if relationships aren't supporting and making it possible for him to go deeper into his creative endeavors, there can be some conflict over values when it comes to the relationship and what both parties value in general. I could go on and on and on, but like I said, this is just kind of the easy, kind of direct way of assessing a chart. Now, the moon both sextiles the North Node exactly and trines the South Node. So I see this as like learning to follow his hunches and his intuition when it comes to communicating, talking to partners, making investments, analyzing things, writing, things like that. So being that the moon, which is a very fortunate planet, okay, in traditional astrology, they see it as like fortune. It's making a sextile to the North Node, supporting the North Node the more he communicates and talks, expresses himself through writing maybe. And then the trine to the South Node is he's clearing some kind of karma with relationships through that process. So that's cool. His midheaven is Virgo, also ruled by Mercury. Mercury's in the 2nd, so he can assess, be a perfectionist, analyze things. There can be a tendency for him to want to organize and group or collect things. So Mercury being in the 2nd is like money, resources, business. It might be books. He might be an avid book collector, especially with that being in Capricorn. It can be historical books or anything relating to generals or things relating to history or tradition. I know that to be true about this person as well. And then we look at Pluto, and Pluto is technically coming into Virgo. Almost, it's the late degrees of Leo, and it's actually within a 3-degree square of his ascendant and his descendant, right? So it's squaring his ascendant, squaring his descendant. So his Pluto work, his constant transformation, his changes, his evolution, right, of his beliefs. The ruler of this is the sun, or the dispositor is the sun. So we've got, you know, Jupiter and Pluto conjunct, big beliefs, transformations in beliefs and things that might be otherworldly in opposition to the sun. So it's challenging the king. It might be challenging relationships with men in his life, right? The sun. Challenging relationships with authority figures, challenging relationships with siblings. Oftentimes that provide really difficult and kind of very challenging conversations and conflicts, especially when it comes to differences of beliefs in general, right? So then we look at what's going on with his patterns. Obviously, you know, he's got a nice mix. We've got planets that are on the northern and the southern hemisphere. That's nice. We see a ton of planets, though, that are technically on the eastern side, which means he's very self-reliant. He wants to do things on his own. He's very fixated in his ways of doing things, right? These seem to be themes that are kind of going on with his chart in general. Obviously, beyond that, if we want to learn about how people relate, we look at their Venus and how they do relationships, or the 7th house Lord. The 5th house Lord for maybe what they love, or how they fall in love. Jupiter is going to just be their insights. Uranus is how they rebel. Mercury is how they communicate. Mars is what they get passionate about. Saturn is where they feel limitations and restrictions, right? And we also do see Pluto in a square to Saturn, so that's another aspect to Pluto. But this is just my very basic, bare bones way of assessing a chart. I think that when you start to put all of these things together, beyond even going into some of the other planetary aspects and placements, this is the kind of crash course in figuring out how to assess a chart and getting a lot from it. A couple books that I would recommend very quickly before I finish. Astrological Insights into Personality by Betty Lundstedt. I like this book. It gives me all the different aspects in a chart and how it relates to the personality. Planets and Houses, Experiencing Your Environment by Robert Petelier. I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But this is one. I'll put this in the description too, guys, so you guys have it. And then also by Robert, we have Planets in Aspect. These are the 3 books that I keep on my desk that I find the most helpful for assessing charts. So sometimes if I'm like stuck on something and I'm like, I need to explain this better. You know, how can I explain this better to a client, especially when I'm prepping for a new client or looking at a chart? Sometimes I'll use these as a reference. There's tons of other books out there. I know, trust me. But these are the ones that I like to work with the most. That and I guess, let me grab this. Nicola's book, Degree Theory. These are all what I keep on my desk that I work with regularly for assessing charts. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if it was. I definitely plan on doing more getting more detail oriented in assessing charts and bringing things up and doing this just so I can create more educational content, but also because I'm prepping and getting ready to start working everything out to start a study group. So I can have a subscription for people who want to join me. Probably it's going to be bi-weekly, and we're going to start doing study groups, and I'm planning on doing that once we get out of some retrogrades. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that bell button so you're alerted when I am making and putting out new videos or going live. Thanks for the support of the channel. I appreciate it. I will be seeing you guys all in just a couple days. I've got a live that's coming up on Saturday in the evening, and we're going to be doing live readings, so make sure you check that out. If you'd like to book a reading with me, check out my links below. Check out my website at beyondtheveiledtarot.com. Where I am taking new clients, and it's a combination of Western and evolutionary astrology, tarot, and what I see clairvoyantly. Thank you guys. I'll see all of you very soon. Take care.